The dust of Arizona Territory swirled across the barren landscape as Nora McKenzie clutched the reins of her wagon with white knuckles. The year was 1882, and she was only 3 days into her journey west to reunite with her ailing father in Tucson when the skies opened up with an unexpected fury. "Easy, easy," she murmured to the panicked horses as thunder cracked overhead. The rain came down in sheets, transforming the dry creek bed she'd been following into a torrent of rushing water. The horses reared, spooked by a flash of lightning that illuminated the darkening sky. Nora had traveled alone despite warnings. At 22, she'd grown tired of being told what a proper Boston lady could or couldn't do. Her mother had passed the previous winter, and the letter from her father's neighbor describing his condition had arrived just 3 weeks ago. There had been no time to arrange a proper escort. She pulled hard on the reins, trying to guide the wagon away from the now swollen creek, but the wheels caught in the sudden mud. The horses screamed in terror as another lightning bolt struck a nearby tree. The wagon lurched forward, then sideways on the slippery slope. "No, no, no," Nora cried out as she felt the wagon begin to tip. Her world turned sideways, then upside down as the wagon rolled. Her head struck something hard, and she felt a searing pain in her side before darkness closed in. Tucker Jenkins had been tracking that storm for the better part of the day, driving his cattle to higher ground before seeking shelter himself. He just secured his horse beneath an overhang when he heard the distant crash and the frightened whinnying of horses. "Damn it all," he muttered, pulling his oilskin coat tighter and mounting his stallion. The rain pelted his face as he rode toward the sound. 27 years in this territory had taught him to never ignore such noises. They usually meant trouble. He spotted the overturned wagon first, then the panicked horses still harnessed but thankfully upright, pulling against their restraints. Tucker dismounted, approaching carefully to avoid spooking them further. "Easy there," he soothed, quickly assessing the situation. The wagon had rolled completely onto its side, its contents scattered across the muddy ground. That's when he saw a pale hand visible through the shattered wagon cover. Tucker rushed to the wreckage, tearing away the canvas to reveal a woman pinned beneath a wooden crate. Blood streaked down her face from a gash on her forehead, and more bloomed crimson across her side where a broken wagon slat had torn through her dress. With careful but urgent movements, Tucker cleared away the debris and pulled her gently from the wreckage. She moaned softly, a sound that brought immense relief. She was bleeding but breathing. "Miss, can you hear me?" Tucker cradled her in his arms, shielding her from the rain with his body. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and night was falling fast. Tucker worked quickly to free the horses from their harnesses, tethering them to his own mount. He gathered what supplies he could salvage, then fashioned a makeshift travois with the wagon canvas and 2 long poles. Carefully, he placed the injured woman on it and began the slow journey back to his ranch. The storm continued to rage as Tucker led the small procession through the darkness. The woman remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. His ranch was modest, but it was dry and safe, and most importantly, close by. His foreman's wife, Mrs. Paulson, had some nursing experience from the war. She would know what to do by the time they reached the ranch. Tucker was soaked to the bone and shivering. He carried the woman into his home, laying her gently on his bed. "Mrs. Paulson," he called, and within moments the older woman appeared, her eyes widening at the sight before her. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, already rolling up her sleeves. "What happened, Mr. Jenkins?" "Wagon accident by Coyote Creek. It's risen with the storm. Found her trapped underneath." Tucker stepped back, watching as Mrs. Paulson expertly began to assess the woman's injuries. She's lost blood, but not too much. Head wound, cut along her ribs, doesn't look like they're broken, thank the Lord. Fetch me hot water and clean linens. She'll need stitching. Tucker did as instructed, his mind racing. Who was this woman? What was she doing out alone in such weather? He gathered the supplies Mrs. Paulson needed, then stood awkwardly at the bedroom door. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything else," he offered, knowing the older woman would need privacy to properly tend to her patient. "This might take a while, Mr. Jenkins," Mrs. Paulson replied without looking up. "Best get yourself dry and warm. I'll call if I need you." Tucker changed into dry clothes, then paced his small kitchen, occasionally glancing at the closed bedroom door. An hour passed before Mrs. Paulson emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "She's still unconscious but stable," the older woman reported. "I've stitched her wounds and cleaned her up as best I could. Found this in her pocket." She handed Tucker a folded, damp letter. Tucker hesitated before opening it, feeling like he was intruding on something private. But they needed to know who she was if there was someone to notify. "It's addressed to a Miss Nora McKenzie," he said, scanning the contents. "From someone named Robert McKenzie in Tucson. Her father, I reckon, says he's been ill and hopes she'll come soon." Tucker folded the letter carefully. "Looks like she was headed to Tucson to see her sick father." "Poor thing," Mrs. Paulson sighed. "All alone on those roads. Providence that you found her, Mr. Jenkins." "I'll ride to town tomorrow, send a wire to Tucson," Tucker decided. "For now, she needs rest. I've given her laudanum for the pain. She'll likely sleep through the night. I can stay if you'd like." Tucker shook his head. "No need to keep you from Mr. Paulson. I'll keep watch. If anything changes, I'll send for you." After Mrs. Paulson departed, Tucker settled into the chair he'd dragged beside the bed. In the soft lamplight, he studied the woman Nora McKenzie. Her face was pale against his pillows, her chestnut hair spread out like a halo. Even with the bruising and the small bandage on her forehead, he could see she was beautiful. There was something refined about her features, a delicateness that seemed out of place in the rugged territory. Tucker dozed fitfully throughout the night, waking at the slightest sound. Near dawn, he was startled fully awake by a soft moan. Nora's eyes were open, wide with confusion and fear. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse but carried the unmistakable accent of the East. "Easy, Miss McKenzie. You're safe," Tucker said gently. "My name is Thomas Jenkins. Most folks call me Tucker. You had an accident with your wagon during the storm. I found you and brought you to my ranch." Nora tried to sit up, then gasped in pain, her hand flying to her bandaged side. "Please don't move," Tucker urged. "You've got stitches along your side and a nasty bump on your head. My wagon. My things," panic edged into her voice. "I salvaged what I could. Your horses are in my stable, well fed and rested. Everything else is safely stored in the barn." She seemed to relax slightly at this news. "How did you know my name?" Tucker showed her the letter. "Had to figure out who you were. Hope you don't mind." Nora closed her eyes briefly. "My father. I need to get to him." "You're not going anywhere for a few days at least." "I'll send a wire to Tucson today, let them know you're safe but delayed." A tear slipped down Nora's cheek. "He's very ill. I might not have much time." Tucker felt his chest tighten at her distress. "I understand, truly, but you won't help him by killing yourself getting there. Let me help you." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of trust forming between strangers thrown together by circumstance. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," she finally said. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "Tucker, please. And there's no debt to repay." Anyone would have done the same. But as he said it, Tucker knew that wasn't entirely true. The Arizona Territory in 1882 wasn't always kind to travelers, especially those who journeyed alone. Nora McKenzie had been fortunate he'd been the one to find her. Over the next few days, Nora's strength gradually returned. The wire Tucker sent to Tucson had been answered with relief her father was still holding on, eager for her arrival but insistent she recover fully before attempting the remainder of the journey. Mrs. Paulson visited daily to change Nora's bandages and bring fresh clothes, simple dresses that belonged to her daughter who had married and moved to California. They were plainer than Nora's Eastern fashions, but practical for her recovery. On the fourth day, Tucker helped Nora to the porch, where she sat in a rocking chair watching the sunset paint the desert landscape in golds and purples. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Different from anything I've ever seen." Tucker leaned against the porch railing, watching her face as she took in the view. "Different from Boston, I reckon," Nora nodded. "In every way imaginable, everything here is so vast, untamed." "That's why I love it," Tucker admitted. "Room to breathe. To be whoever you want without neighbors peering over your fence." "Is that why you came west? To escape scrutiny?" Tucker considered her question. "Partly. Left Kentucky after the war. Too many ghosts there. Wanted something new, something that wasn't built on old wounds." "You fought in the war?" Nora asked carefully. Union sighed. "Wasn't much older than a boy. Saw things no one should see." Tucker rarely spoke about those days, but something about Nora made the words come easier. "What about you? What brings a Boston lady to Arizona Territory alone?" Nora's fingers played with the edge of her borrowed shawl. "My father came out here 10 years ago after my mother refused to leave Boston. They never divorced, just lived separate lives. I stayed with her until she passed last winter." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "When I received word of my father's illness, I knew I had to come. Mother never understood his need for adventure, for new horizons, but I think I do." "Sounds like you might have more of your father in you than your mother," Tucker observed. A small smile curved Nora's lips. "Perhaps. I've always felt constrained by Boston society. The endless rules about what a lady should and shouldn't do. I've been chaperoned and corseted my entire life." She looked up at the open sky. "Out here, I feel like I can breathe for the first time." Their conversations became a nightly ritual as Nora continued to heal. Tucker found himself sharing stories of his years ranching, of cattle drives and frontier justice. Nora told him of Boston's cobblestone streets, of literature and music, of a world that seemed increasingly distant to her. One evening, a week after the accident, Tucker returned from checking his herd to find Nora in the kitchen, her face flushed with exertion as she stirred something on the stove. "What are you doing?" he asked, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "Making dinner," she replied, somewhat defensively. "I'm perfectly capable despite what Mrs. Paulson might think. I can't keep letting you do everything while I just sit around." Tucker approached, peering into the pot. "Smells good. What is it?" "Beef stew, or at least my attempt at it." "Your cookbooks are somewhat minimal," Tucker chuckled. "Don't have much need for fancy recipes out here." He reached past her for a spoon, his arm brushing against hers. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through his body. Nora seemed to feel it too, her cheeks coloring as she stepped aside. "I hope it's edible. Mother never thought cooking was an appropriate skill for a lady to master. We had servants for that." "Well, I'm not particular," Tucker assured her. "Anything's better than my own cooking." They ate together at his small table, the lantern between them casting a warm glow. Tucker watched as Nora took obvious pride in his enjoyment of the meal. "You should be resting," he said after they'd finished. "Your side still needs time to heal." "I'm tired of resting," Nora admitted, "and I don't want to be a burden. You've already done so much." "You're not a burden," Tucker said firmly, "but I understand feeling restless. Tomorrow, if you're up for it, I could show you around the ranch, get you some fresh air." Nora's face lit up. "I'd like that very much." The next morning dawned clear and mild. Tucker helped Nora onto his gentlest mare, staying close as they rode slowly around the property. He showed her the spring that provided water year-round, the corral where he broke wild horses, the small orchard he'd planted that was finally beginning to bear fruit. "How many acres do you have?" Nora asked as they paused on a rise overlooking the valley. "Bit over 600, Tucker replied. "Not the biggest spread, but it's all mine. Paid for it with years of breaking horses and driving cattle for other men." "It's wonderful," Nora said sincerely. "You've built something real here." Tucker felt an unfamiliar surge of pride at her words. "It's a good life. Lonely sometimes, but good." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Tucker thought about how it would feel to share this life with someone. With her. The thought startled him. He'd known her barely a week. Nora looked away first, her gaze returning to the landscape. "I can see why my father loves this territory. There's a freedom here I never knew existed." That evening, after a simple dinner, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. The night was cool, and Tucker noticed Nora shiver slightly. "Cold?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. Without thinking, Tucker moved his chair closer and wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders. Nora tensed briefly, then relaxed against him. "In Boston, this would cause quite the scandal," she murmured, but made no move to pull away. "Good thing we're not in Boston," Tucker replied softly. They sat in comfortable silence, the proximity stirring feelings in Tucker that he'd long since buried. It had been years since he'd allowed himself to care for anyone. The territory was hard on relationships, women were scarce, and those who did venture west often found the life too harsh, the comforts too few. But Nora was different. Despite her Eastern upbringing, she seemed to embrace the wildness of the land, to see its beauty rather than its harshness. "I should be continuing to Tucson soon," Nora said suddenly, breaking the silence. "My father is waiting." The words felt like a physical blow, though Tucker had always known her stay was temporary. "Of course. When do you think you'll be ready to travel?" Nora hesitated. "Mrs. Paulson says my stitches can come out in another few days, perhaps after that." Tucker nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. "I'll help you prepare. Make sure your wagon is repaired properly." "Thank you." Nora's voice was soft. "For everything." The next few days passed too quickly for Tucker's liking. He worked with his ranch hands to repair Nora's wagon, ensuring it was sturdy enough for the remaining journey. He found himself creating unnecessary tasks, reasons to delay the completion. Each evening, he returned to find Nora more active, helping with meals, moving about the house with increasing confidence. The night before her planned departure, Tucker returned from the barn to find Nora standing in the middle of his small parlor, dressed in her own clothing, once more a proper Eastern dress, her hair styled as it had likely been when she first set out from Boston. "Mrs. Paulson helped me wash and mend it," she explained, smoothing the fabric self-consciously. "I thought I should look presentable when I arrive in Tucson." Tucker realized he'd grown accustomed to seeing her in the simple dresses she'd borrowed, her hair loose around her shoulders. This formal version of Nora seemed like a stranger. "You look beautiful," he said honestly. "Your father will be proud to see you." Nora's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've packed my things. Everything's ready for tomorrow." Tucker nodded, unable to find the right words. The thought of his home without her presence left him hollow. They ate dinner in relative silence, the impending separation hanging between them. Afterward, instead of their usual conversation on the porch, Nora excused herself early, claiming she needed rest before the journey. Tucker remained at the table long after she'd gone, wrestling with feelings he hadn't anticipated. In just 2 weeks, this woman had somehow become essential to his world. The thought of her leaving felt like losing a limb. He was still sitting there when he heard her bedroom door open and soft footsteps approach. Nora stood in the doorway, her expression troubled. "I can't sleep," she admitted. Tucker rose from his chair. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "Yes, but not for the reasons you might think." Nora took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I'm afraid of leaving here, of leaving you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Tucker crossed the room slowly, stopping just before her. "Then don't," he said simply. "My father will go together," Tucker interrupted. "I'll take you to him. Stay as long as you need, and after." "After," Nora whispered. Tucker reached for her hand, taking it gently in his. "After, if you wanted, you could come back here. With me." Nora's eyes searched his face. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Tucker said firmly. "I know you're brave and stubborn and stronger than you realize. I know the way your eyes light up when you watch the sunset and how you hum to yourself when you think no one's listening." A tear slipped down Nora's cheek. "I've never felt this way before. It terrifies me." Tucker brushed the tear away with his thumb. "Me too, but some things are worth being afraid for." Nora stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. "In Boston, people court for months, even years before speaking of a future together." "This isn't Boston," Tucker reminded her gently. "Out here, life doesn't always give you the luxury of time. When you find something real, you hold on to it." Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the gentle press of lips. The second was more certain, a promise taking shape between them. "Stay with me tonight," Nora whispered against his mouth. "Just to talk, to be close. I'm not ready to say goodbye." Tucker nodded, following her back to the bedroom where he'd first brought her, bleeding but breathing. They lay side by side on top of the covers, talking in low voices about hopes and fears, about the past they'd each left behind, and the future that suddenly seemed possible. Somewhere in the quiet hours before dawn, they fell asleep, Nora's head on Tucker's chest, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Morning came with new clarity. Over breakfast, they formed a plan they would travel together to Tucson, where Nora would reunite with her father. Tucker would stay as long as needed, and when the time was right, they would return to the ranch. Together. The journey to Tucson took 3 days, during which their bond deepened. Tucker pointed out landmarks, teaching Nora about the territory that was becoming her home. Nora shared stories of her childhood, of the mother who had loved her but never understood her, of the father whose adventurous spirit she'd inherited. Robert McKenzie's modest home sat on the outskirts of Tucson. When they arrived, Nora rushed inside to find her father propped up in bed, his face lighting up at the sight of his daughter. "Nora," he exclaimed, his voice weak but joyful. "My God, I'd begun to think I'd never see you again." Nora embraced him carefully, mindful of his frailty. "I'm here now, Father, and I've brought someone I want you to meet." Tucker stood awkwardly in the doorway until Nora beckoned him forward. He removed his hat, extending his hand to the older man. "Thomas Jenkins, sir. Most call me Tucker." Robert's eyes moved between his daughter and Tucker, a knowing smile spreading across his weathered face. "So that's how it is, eh? Knew something must have happened when that wire came saying you were delayed." Nora blushed. "It wasn't like that, Father. I had an accident. My wagon rolled during a storm. Tucker found me and saved my life." Robert's expression grew serious. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay, Mr. Jenkins." "No debt, sir. Just did what needed doing." Over the next weeks, Tucker watched as Nora tended to her father with devoted care. Robert's health improved somewhat under her attention. though it was clear his condition was chronic rather than temporary. During this time, Tucker made himself useful around the property, repairing the roof, reinforcing the corral, ensuring the small homestead was secure. In the evenings, the three of them would sit together, Robert regaling them with tales of his adventures across the territory. Tucker saw in the older man the same spark he'd recognized in Nora, a yearning for freedom, for wide open spaces. One evening, as Nora prepared dinner, Robert beckoned Tucker to his bedside. "She loves you," the older man stated without preamble. "I can see it in her eyes," Tucker nodded. "And I love her, sir, more than I thought possible." "Good, that's good." Robert coughed, wincing with the effort. "I don't have much time left, Tucker. We both know it." Sir Robert held up a hand. "No, let me finish. I need to know she'll be cared for when I'm gone, that she won't be alone." "She won't be," Tucker promised. "If she'll have me, I intend to marry her." Robert's face relaxed with relief. "Have you asked her yet?" "No, sir. Didn't seem right with her just reunited with you." "Don't wait," Robert advised. "Life's too short for waiting. Learned that the hard way myself." The next day, while Nora was in town purchasing supplies, Tucker rode to the small jewelry shop on Tucson's Main Street. He returned with a simple gold band, nothing fancy but solid and true, like his feelings for her. That evening, he asked Nora to walk with him under the desert stars. When they reached a small rise overlooking the town, Tucker took her hands in his. "I had a talk with your father yesterday," he began. Nora's expression grew concerned. "Is he worse? Did he say something?" "No, nothing like that," Tucker assured her. "He gave me his blessing to ask you something important." Tucker dropped to one knee, the ring held between his fingers. "Nora McKenzie, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Nora's hands flew to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. For a terrible moment, Tucker feared he'd misread everything, moved too fast. Then she nodded, dropping to her knees to face him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Tucker, I will." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at Robert's bedside, the local minister officiating. Robert beamed throughout, his happiness visibly boosting his strength. As they exchanged vows, Tucker saw not only his future with Nora, but the gift they'd been given the chance to create something beautiful from what could have been a tragedy. Robert McKenzie passed peacefully in his sleep 3 months later. Nora grieved deeply, but found comfort in Tucker's steady presence. After the funeral, they made the decision to return to Tucker's ranch, bringing with them Robert's few possessions and the memories of a man who had embraced life on his own terms. The return journey felt different no longer. Was Nora a passenger in her own story? She rode beside Tucker as an equal partner, her eyes taking in the landscape with ownership and belonging. When they crested the final ridge and Tucker's ranch came into view, he reached over to take her hand. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jenkins." Nora smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Home. I like the sound of that." Spring brought new life to the ranch. Tucker expanded the house, adding rooms for the future they both envisioned. Nora planted a garden, mixing practical vegetables with flowers that reminded her of her mother's Boston garden. They worked side by side, building something neither had dared to dream of before fate had thrown them together. One evening, exactly 1 year after the accident that had brought them together, Tucker and Nora sat on their porch watching the sunset. Nora leaned against her husband's shoulder, her hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her stomach. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked softly. "If the storm hadn't come that day, if my wagon hadn't rolled?" Tucker covered her hand with his own. "I believe some things are meant to be, no matter what path gets you there, but I'm grateful every day that I was the one who found you, bleeding but breathing, Nora murmured with a small smile. "Strongest woman I've ever known," Tucker replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. As darkness fell over the Arizona territory, the stars emerged one by one in the vast desert sky. On the porch of the ranch they now shared, Tucker and Nora Jenkins watched the heavens unfold, secure in the knowledge that sometimes love finds you when you least expect it, even when a wagon rolls onto its side in the wild heart of the West.